everyone, welcome or welcome back. If you're new here, my name's Nena. I help people to declutter their minds and their homes using practical applications of psychology. And today we're talking all about 8 habits that lead to disorganization and clutter. So getting straight to the point, if we are overwhelmed with clutter to the point where we really feel like we can't even control it anymore, chances are we have some lifestyle habits that are really working against us. Now, as many of you know, this is an area of my life that I struggled with for years, and I learned the hard way that it's often our habits that are the key to success or lack of success in almost every aspect of our life. And in the case of our home, it can be the difference between having a living space that is clean and organized, or having one that is completely disorganized and filled with mess and clutter. And of course, we know through research that the impact of living in mess and clutter can be pretty severe and can negatively affect many different aspects of our life, from our health and well-being all the way to our relationships. Now, I have worked with enough people who greatly struggle with disorganization and clutter to have been able to find the different patterns of thought and behavior that are often the culprits responsible for keeping our house a mess. And since so many of these things are mindsets and habits that I myself used to struggle with, I thought it would be helpful today to offer a list of these habits and also offer some realistic solutions. But before we jump in, I just want to quickly let you know that if you feel like some of these ring a bell and you feel like you need maybe a little bit more support in some of these areas, I do have full-length videos on most of these topics that can be found in the Psychology of Disorganization playlist. And I will go ahead and link that in the description box below so you have these resources. And with that being said, let's go ahead and dive right in. Number 1 is keeping things just in case. Now, this comes from having a scarcity mindset. We will hold on to things that we think we may need in the future, even when they have absolutely no use right now. Now, it can be extremely difficult for us to get rid of these items because we think that they're perfectly good, and we feel like it's a shame or waste to let these items go, especially when we haven't ever used them before. And I've also found that people who tend to struggle with this type of thinking are very creative. They can find a potential use for just about everything that they own, even though in reality, they probably are never going to use any of these things for any of these creative purposes. Just the fact that they can think of a potential use for these items makes it difficult for them to let it go. So here we need to simply shift our focus away from the future and all these what if scenarios to the reality of the present moment. In the present moment, these items are taking away from us. They take away our time, our energy, our space, and our attention, and are likely adding little to no value to our life. We need to begin to be honest with ourselves if these are items that we don't love or need in the now. And we also need to question how realistic the scenarios that we've created in our head about the future need for these items really are. It can also help us to feel better to brainstorm potential solutions for what would happen if we got rid of the item and then we decided that we needed it for something specific. So for example, could we borrow something similar from a friend, or could we actually replace it at a very low cost? Now, realistically, this is all fear-based thinking, and these scenarios are likely to never ever happen. But it can help us to relax, to realize that even if we got rid of the item and we decided that we needed it again in the future, that there are still solutions. The irony here is that even though most of us are worrying about not having enough in the future, the real problem for most of us is that we have too much in the now, and that's why we are struggling with clutter in the first place. Now, this can be a sensitive issue and also a real challenge to address at first, but I do have a very compassionate video that walks you through the process of changing this tendency in a way that doesn't fill you with anxiety. So I will go ahead and link that down in the description box as well. Number 2 is not having a specific place to keep everything. Now, homeless items are one of the biggest issues when it comes to clutter because we spend so much time and energy just kind of shuffling these items around because they really have no place to be. So they end up just kind of cluttering up our floor or our surface areas, and they tend to pile up very quickly. So a temporary solution for this can be to find a home for all the homeless items. So that can be a box in the closet, it can be a junk drawer, it can be a miscellaneous bin, but we have to start to break the habit of just letting these things float around. And of course, the solution long term is to find or create a space for every single item that you own to live. And this ends up saving us so much time when we are cleaning because we don't have to kind of create these areas on the spot. So we can start this process by simply gathering up all these items and putting them in the temporary area, and then one by one figuring out where these things are going to permanently live. And I have found that not only does this make life a lot easier, but it also helps us to realize when we have more things than we actually have room for. Number 3 is sentimentalism. Now, this is when we are trying to somehow keep a museum of our past or an entire physical history of our loved ones. And there are many different reasons that may drive us to want to do this. It can be tied to our identity or our fear that our memories will be lost if we get rid of these items. But if we find that we are wanting to keep all of our children's Halloween costumes or all of their artwork, or we still have our prom dress from junior high or our grandmother's entire living room set, this could be an issue that we are struggling with. And this one can be a tough one to address because we can feel a lot of guilt and sadness at the thought of letting these items go, because in a way we think that we are throwing away the past, and we can have some very real emotional attachment to these items. So because of this, instead of offering you a quick solution that probably won't be that helpful, I'm going to refer you to a full-length video that I created on this topic because I think it's something that we need to go a little bit deeper into. And this video in particular is one that many people have told me was what finally helped them to be able to change this area of their life. So I will go ahead and link that in the description box below as well. But this is an area that you can still absolutely change. Number 4 is not putting things away. So here I'm talking about not putting things back after we use them, but also just kind of dropping everything wherever we want to on the floor when we get home. This is a habit that I was definitely guilty of. I think we try to convince ourselves that there's going to be this magical time where we feel like putting this stuff away and it will get done. But in reality, most of the time, this stuff just ends up sitting out there forever because we never actually feel like taking care of it. Usually these things take like 20 seconds to put away, but we still don't do it. And once there is that visual clutter, clutter just kind of attracts more clutter, and we don't think twice about letting the space get more messy. Now, the key to this one really is just awareness, noticing when you are doing it and reminding yourself that it is a lot easier to take the 30 seconds that it takes to put your shoes away or to put away your keys or wallet or purse than to have to spend an hour or 2 hours in a week trying to put all these things back and likely never actually even getting to it. It's actually really an act of self-love to our future self to just go ahead and put these things away. And once we start making this a habit, we don't think twice. We just start instinctively putting things away, and the clutter and the mess will start to disappear. Number 5 is bringing things into the home without a plan. Many times we buy things that we really don't need simply because they are a good deal or they are on sale, or we buy something on impulse online that we definitely could live without. And unfortunately, these things can very quickly become clutter. We can go to the dollar store and come back with 6 bags of items that we didn't intend to buy, and now we have to sit and try to figure out where these things are all going to go. We also have to be careful about taking things into our home that are gifted to us. A lot of times we take things that people offer us simply because they don't cost anything, but really we have absolutely no use for them. This can also sometimes tie into that scarcity mindset. But even when things don't cost us anything monetarily, it still costs us in the way of space, time, and the energy it takes to maintain it. So something that we can start to do is to plan our purchases ahead of time. And if there is something that we think we need or that we want, at least sleep on it. And the next day, if we think that we really do want it, go ahead and get it. But if it's something that we don't think it's worth driving all the way back for, then clearly it's something that is not that important to us. And when it comes to other people giving us things, we need to consider if these are things we're going to actually value and if we have space for them. Are these things that we would actually buy if they weren't free? Are they things that we would be proud to own or wear or use? If not, we need to resist the temptation to bring it into our home, because all we are doing is giving ourselves more work in the future, because eventually we are going to get rid of these things. Number 6 is procrastination. I have said this many times before, but most clutter can be boiled down to either delayed decisions or delayed actions. Now, procrastination can be a habit, but it can also be linked to the fear of failure or the fear of making the wrong decision. It can also be connected to anxiety or depression, or be a symptom of ADHD or other issues that cause difficulty with executive functioning. But unfortunately, no matter what the cause, the end result is the same. Procrastination also completely destroys our motivation, making it extremely difficult for us to ever make progress. And if this is something that you feel that you do struggle with, I have several videos that I made that discuss very effective and non-intimidating strategies to change this behavior that I will also go ahead and link down below. Number 7 is excuse making. Now, sometimes our excuses do have some validity, but other times we simply use them so that we don't even have to make an attempt to try to improve the situation. So we might say that all of our clutter is because of our spouse, or because of our children, or it's because our house is just too small and it makes no sense to declutter because it's just going to get cluttered up anyway. Or maybe it's that we don't mind living in clutter or mess, or that we have absolutely no time whatsoever to clean or get organized, or whatever excuse that we can think of. And like I said, sometimes these things can be based in truth, at least somewhat, but other times we really exaggerate the degree that they prevent us from making progress, because sometimes it's just easier to say something is impossible than have to try to address it. The problem here is that convincing ourselves that these statements are 100% true makes us feel defeated and creates limiting beliefs that make it impossible for us to make progress in the future, because we think it's just going to be hopeless. So what is the solution here? Well, 3 things can be incredibly helpful. The first is being honest with ourselves. The second is letting go of perfectionism. And the third is brainstorming creative solutions. It could very well be the case that what we were using as an excuse does make cleaning and decluttering a lot more challenging. But it probably doesn't actually make it impossible. We can sit down and make a list of actions that we could take that could still make the situation a little bit better, remembering that we need to not focus on things becoming perfect. It's probably not realistic, so it's better to focus on simply making some progress. So for example, if we think that kids are really the barrier to having a clean home, maybe we could focus on at least having a clean bedroom for ourselves so we could have a little sanctuary, or giving the children a simple daily task that they could perform to help us to keep the house a little neater. We need to stop thinking of these things as blocks and using them as excuses. We can instead use them as opportunities to think out of the box and to come up with creative solutions. And number 8 is not creating routines or systems. Now, this is probably the biggest one, because even if our house is sparkling clean and perfectly organized, it will not stay that way if we do not have routines and habits that are set in place to help us keep up with basic tasks. But even though this really is essential, trying to suddenly create 100 new habits or routines is not only overwhelming, but it's also not usually possible. If it were that easy, we would have done this a long time ago go and our house would not be messy or cluttered to begin with. When we try to change too much too fast, we cannot keep up with it and we usually end up giving up. But the good news is that we can successfully create new routines and habits in a way that is not nearly as overwhelming and intimidating when we have smaller, realistic goals and when we concentrate on the areas that most need our focus. And not surprisingly, this is a topic that I have created several videos about that I will go ahead and link down in the description box as well, because I cannot stress enough how much habits really are the key to change. Because really, when we have positive habits that help us keep up with the basics, the clutter takes a lot longer to accumulate and we start to gain control over the household. Maybe we have a pile or two here or there now and then, but it's never going to get back to the mountain that we were once used to. So I am so curious to hear which of these mindsets and habits you feel have been holding you back the most. Also, feel free to share in the comments if you have any tips or tricks that you have personally found beneficial and helpful in any of these areas. As always, I truly hope that you found today's video to be helpful. If you did, please like it, share it, and definitely become a subscriber if you aren't one already. I would absolutely love it if you stayed connected. I want to thank you so much for spending time with me today, and I hope the rest of your day is extraordinary.